Hey everybody, Greg White, the drone wizard here. Hey, we've got an awesome topic today. Everybody's really interested in remote ID. The notice for proposed rulemaking is out there. We've got to get some comments in. I'd like to see everybody get them in February, not wait till March 2nd, but we've got an awesome panel today. We've got the drone boss, the drone boss with the Sky Network with us, Damon Darnall. He is here with us, and we've got Eric Wilhelmsen in Aviated Precision up in New York, and we've got Bobby Mims. Bobby Mims is with Diamond Air Drone Services. What an awesome team. We're going to talk about some of the great points that we think are what we need to comment on in this rulemaking comment section, and we're going to bring that to you today on Dronepreneur.
Now, we are talking about the remote ID, the proposed NPRM, about that, and we're going to be sharing our thoughts, our ideas, our concerns, and also giving you guys some tools and resources, so not only to educate you about this, but also what you can do to help and to have an impact in this. A couple things to discuss here, but one of the first things is I think we should kind of touch on and share with everybody what is the remote ID. And basically what this is it's a electronic license plate in the sky. And the idea is that we can safely track and see where the drones are, just like we can with aircraft and air traffic control. And it just, as we get more drones in the airspace, it's something that's necessary. I'm all for it, but I'm not for the way that this NPRM is written, and there's some, in my opinion, major flaws. So what do you guys think about that?
I agree 100%. Listen, the whole aviation industry is transitioning to this kind of system. Aviation uses broadcast ID in aircraft for ATC to know where they are and transmit data. There's no different in the drone industry. We definitely need to be using a remote ID system to broadcast to government officials, to law enforcement. People need to know those things. There's nothing wrong with holding our community accountable. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a lot wrong, I think, with the rule the way it's written now. I agree that we can do better.
Yeah, 100% am with you all as well. Coming from a public safety background, I understand the need of having something like this to help our law enforcement and our homeland security and security efforts. But I also believe that there are ways with the technology that we have already to help reduce the negative impact that this would have on drone entrepreneurs, drone pilots, business owners in this industry. So I think it's imperative for all of us to take the opportunity that we have to make our voices be heard, so that the government during this comments period can understand what a respectful, well-guided, well-thought-out strategy to help guide our government into making better choices, so that it doesn't have a negative impact on us that has a huge expense for, or possible huge expense for us.
So can you guys elaborate a little bit more on how it actually affects business, dronepreneurs and, across the country? What are the repercussions, and what does it actually mean to the commercial sector for drones?
Sure. I'll start if you don't mind. So one of the biggest impacts that I see with this proposed rule with drone businesses and drone pilots is, if you were to fly under the standard remote ID proposal, it would require you to have a membership or a subscription with a third-party industry, a third-party company that would be taking the information and being able to process it and put it through. So this would require you to have some type of monthly subscription, which the FAA defines that they propose, or they assume that it would only be $2.50 a month up to $30 annually. But this is just an assumption on their part, because this technology has not been developed, it has not been tested, and it has not been perfected. So if you think about a business that has to go through research and development of new a process of information, data collection, data security, all these things, it can create a huge expense. And a business is not going to do this unless they think they can get a big return on their investment. Who do you think is going to pay for that? The drone pilots, the drone business people. On top of the other impact that the FAA does not discuss is we as drone pilots or drone business people will have to pay for the data, whether it's through cell phone service or internet service. And that's an unknown that the FAA doesn't even address as to what that data expense will be for us in uploading the required information to this RID NPRM.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bobby. And one of the things, like, you guys can read it for yourself. It's on page 210 of the NPRM. But the other thing too, where they're calculating this, is they're basing it on the 8 million plus drones that have been sold in the U.S., assuming that every single drone is going to pay for this this subscription. And it's just simply not the case. You know, that's going to be a small fraction of that. So that number, as you alluded to, first of all, we have no idea what it's going to cost. Typically, everything is always much more than when people think. A perfect example in our industry with drones is, look at all these startups. You know, like the Lily drone, which was probably one of the biggest ones that was kind of the biggest failure. This was a great marketing campaign to come up with this great drone. They raised $30 million. And I'm sure the developers thought, if we could just get $1 million, which I think was their initial, their stretch goal, then we could build anything. And then they got in there and started building it. And then it turns out 30 million wasn't even enough. And they, had to go bankrupt. So the same thing, as it starts to grow, the challenge is, if we go with this internet-based system, then everything is going to come back to us as the commercial drone operators. And we're going to bear the burden of this cost, and bear the burden of not the 8 million drones that are out there, but however many we actually end up, with that are operating commercially. Now, the good thing about this is that it does weed out, and as regulation moves forward, we're going to weed out the people that aren't committed, the non-professional people. So as far as the industry itself, it's going to be beneficial, but this proposal, the way it is, I think it has too many flaws, and there's better solutions, which we'll be talking about here shortly.
And I think it might be a good idea for the listeners just to back up just a little bit and explain a little bit about what remote ID is. What are the laws, that they're proposing to us, and how does it affect us? What are they talking about? What is remote ID? So just keep in mind that this is a law that's being proposed that is for aircraft over 0.55 pounds, right? And also, there's going to be different types of remote ID. There's going to be standard remote ID, which will have broadcast and internet capability. And there's going to be limited remote ID, which would just have internet-based remote ID. And then there's
let me pull those up for you, Greg. So we've got an actual visual there. So here's kind of how it looks and how the breakdown is. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, please. Yeah, go ahead. You can take this over. That's a great graphic. I wanted to kind of explain that to everybody.
Yeah, and basically what they're proposing here is the 3 ways of identification. We've got, as Greg mentioned, the standard, where this is, your drone has to have internet connectivity, basically data, the ability to transmit the data and everything. And law enforcement can see this, and also anybody that has a subscription to this can see some of the information. And we'll get into the privacy aspects of this later, but this is the kind of overview of it. And then second is what they're calling limited remote ID. And this is going to limit you on the connectivity and potentially some of the places you can actually fly. This is where you or your device that you're flying or operating with is connected to the internet. The drone is not. So this is going to be limited. The third one here, which is, basically you don't have any, connectivity. This is, in this particular one, you're limited. This would be similar to like AMA or special model fields that are designated to drones. These are basically drone airports, and these have been around for decades. In fact, one of the first organizations was actually founded around drones, where we had designated drone airports, and we flew drones around, and we had competitions and all kinds of stuff. And this happened 22 years prior to the FAA ever even being formed or considered. So this formed a lot of the aviation. So it's going to limit us to those, but it's going to greatly restrict it on several levels. One, you're limited to a 400-foot altitude, but also 400 feet of distance, which is not realistic for a lot of the remote control or the unmanned aircraft that are being flown recreationally. The landing path that they need is greater than 400 feet for a lot of these things. So that's the proposal that's there, and then we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But
Right.
any other comments on that you guys would like to
Yeah,
add?
just, I mean, real quick, I'd like to just add this. I mean, it right there, broadcast remote ID is out there. I mean, you can do that today, right? It's like, we don't have to make a lot of changes to be able to do broadcast ID. The law enforcement can see our drones today. Government officials can see our drones today. And we are transmitting with some drones, not all drones, but with some drones with broadcast today. So it's not like this is some far-fetched system that we're saying that we should do, right? And there's solutions for all of these things that we're talking about. And so we're going to talk about some of those things today as well.
Yeah, and why don't we, transition into that, right? Because there's basically two types of systems that we can use. It's broadcast versus internet. Now, the NPRM here it's widely, I guess, biased to the internet-based model, but they also mention that we can, that broadcast is a viable option, and it is something that's a solution there. And to your point, Greg, you look at DJI, which is a drone manufacturer. Over 80% of the drones flying in the United States are DJI drones. They already have this. They've proven it. They actually tested this and did demos of this broadcast system just a few months ago. So it's out. It's in the majority of the drones flying around already. It's already a viable option, and it ties in with what aviation has already. But for other reasons, that doesn't seem to be the direction that that the FAA is pushing towards. And I've got my own personal beliefs on that. But what are some of your thoughts on, or the rest of you guys? What do you think? Why are they pushing the internet-based version so much?
Well, I don't know necessarily. I mean, I have a personal opinion that a lot of it has to do with the big industry, where the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, the ARC, which was made up 75% of the members in law enforcement, telecommunications, security technology, and only 7% were made up of primary drone businesses, were in on this, and they submitted their proposal that would include the just the broadcast radio ID. And somewhere in the mix, from the ARC's research this last summer until this proposal was released in December, somebody was able to promote, and as we all know how government has different people that would try to influence them to help line their pockets with more money. And I have this feeling and belief that there's big industry that's involved that is encouraging the FAA to push this, because they think that there's some money that can be made for third-party industries that are possibly already out there and that have a strong voice right now with our government and with our bureaucracies.
Yeah, I mean, the big elephant in the room, Bobby, I think you're exactly right. It's obvious that big industry on using drones for delivering packages and things like that, that's where maybe this rulemaking that it's proposed would fit to their lobbyist, and so I think that we could come up with another solution instead of worrying about beyond visual line of sight, which is a small sector of the drone world, that we create this law in a different manner than what's being proposed.
Right. Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think that that's for the fact that they put this committee together, like Bobby mentioned, and then for the FAA to totally ignore the ARC's suggestions and recommendations for how to do it, that's just a blatant, shot in the dark there, that they've got there's other reasons behind it. So that brings up a couple other issues too, or other thoughts. So one of the concerns that came up or concerns or thoughts or reasons for this is it's really driven by safety ultimately, is one of the things that they're really pushing, and why this is so important. But the reality is that the drones are really they are without a shadow of the doubt the safest technology ever in aviation history. I mean, we don't have any other technology in aviation history that comes close to this. And just some numbers to put it in perspective for everybody. There's 220,556 general aviation and for-hire aircraft that are flying around the United States. We have over 8 million drones flying around in the United States. Since basically this has been tracked, there are 3 reported drone collisions with aircraft. And all 3 of these resulted in minor damage, no fatalities, no injuries or anything. But with aviation, we can't say the same. Not even in the last year, we've got far more fatalities than that that have to do with aviation. And the numbers, here we have 220,000 versus 8 million. I mean, it's crazy to say that it's really there. The safety argument just isn't there because it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's definitely, in my opinion, about a control, the ability to control. And as Greg said earlier, with the different industries that have a huge stake in this, with delivery and commerce and those types of things, I would even sometimes say that they're doing what they can to get rid of the small guy, to eliminate that impact, or the ability for the small business owner to be flying in the skies because of concerns that they're dreaming up. Whereas, just as Damon says, we have 0 fatalities then with drones. And in the aircraft industry, that's just unheard of. So it's a bit frustrating, but we've got to not get frustrated. We've got to stay positive, and again, just come together as a good group that has a strong voice, a guided voice to help guide the government in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because they don't know. This is all uncharted territory. This is all new. This is a disruptive industry, which is awesome and amazing and incredible. And so there's going to be a lot of this where that comes up. And this isn't the first NPRM that we've had come up, and it's not going to be the last one. There are going to be other ones as well.
I just want everybody to remember that. I mean, it's like, and once you give up certain, once you capitulate a certain amount, right, you're always you can't get it back. It's just like privatization of our ATC system, right? It's like, once we start this process with USS stations and we're paying a premium, that's going to just continue to go where we don't want it to go, right? So it's not a good idea to do that, in my opinion.
Now, some other things that come up. So is the legality, is this even legal? And that spawns a couple different other questions. So one of them is, we've got the
FISA law.
Yeah, 50.1801 subsection 101, the Foreign Intelligence Security Act.
Yeah, so we don't even know if it's
breaking a direct violation
law, right?
of that.
Yeah, we don't even understand that. I mean, there are quite a few people that think that, this internet-based USS Wi-Fi, signal is breaching that law, and we don't really know that yet.
Right, and just so for you that aren't familiar with the law, it basically says this under this Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It says the collection of domestic wire communications and radio communications from United States citizens is prohibited unless a warrant to obtain such information has been issued by law enforcement. So that is exactly what this is proposing that is going on. So that's a big question, of that. And again, it's something they probably didn't think about, when they were creating this.
As well as, what if it's a minor, right? What if they're under 18? There's a lot of under 18 people flying drones, aren't there? Of course, right? And so then you get into laws and regulations around you know, tracking information on a miner. And I know there's a lot of people talking about that. And I think it's something to address in this in NPRM.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm concerned with about that, and I think it's a very valid argument, but again, knowing how the government works and how they will probably approach this, is they will probably ask you to sign a waiver of release in order to get a subscription to fly under the standard RID. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just like we give up a lot of our rights when we go through the airports and allow them to frisk us and do certain things that some of us believe aren't necessarily constitutional, but because we need to get from one place in our country to another, we go through that process. So I anticipate they will approach this in a way that would say, if you're going to choose to fly, just like drive your car, you have to have a driver's license, you have to put a seatbelt on. Well, there are certain requirements that we're going to have of you in order for you to fly in our airspace, and that would be releasing that information. So even though I think it's a very valid point and something that we need to remind the government of, we need to be prepared as well how to respond to, well, if you sign off your rights to be a part of this subscription with the USS.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be. My point is, look, let's just don't do it because they say we need to do it, right? There's a system in place today that works. Broadcast works.
Absolutely.
So why give up this privacy and why give up this right as a citizen? You know, not just because they say we need to. You know, let's put up a fight. That's what this notice for proposed rulemaking is about. Let's let them know how we feel about this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, and that's why, you know, I'm excited you guys have tuned in. The panel's here to help and support, and your guys' passion for this, you know, for this topic and for the industry. But for everyone listening, I mean, it's super important that you guys, you know, that you guys actually let your voice be heard and let it known. You know, and a lot of you that are watching might be saying, well, you know, I'm a hobbyist. I just do it for fun. It's not that big a deal. But it is, and I can tell you, you know, I'm a lifetime member with the AMA, and I've been a member with them since 1976, and that they've done a lot for the industry. They've done a lot for aviation. They've done a lot for aeronautics. They're you know, they're just incredible in creating a place and a community to be able to foster this aviation. Careers have been spawned from that. There's you know industries. There's all kinds of stuff that have come from that. And I think that what they're basically trying to eliminate recreational flying altogether is the way this is worded. You know, one of the challenges with the FAA proposal, and you know, FAA that's the FAA's recognized identification area. These are basically the drone fields. Remember I told you we had these drone airports from, you know, 22 years prior to the FAA ever even being formed. Well, the way these typically work is these drone fields are on the outskirts of town, you know, kind of in the undeveloped areas. And what happens as cities grow, then they expand, and what was out in the sticks is now getting to be the suburbs. So then those fields are bought out by developers, and they build houses or buildings or commercial stuff. And now you move the field out, you know, the drone airport to, you know, now the new outside of town. And then that happens every decade or so. We seem to be relocating these airfields. But under this new proposal, that you have 12 months once the proposal goes into effect, and then after that 12 months, you don't have the ability for any new ones. So in essence, all the ones that are there are going to be gone in short order, and there'll be no other places to develop and build this up. And I remember being a young kid and, you know, doing this with my dad, and this was a huge thing. This was what got me into aviation and my love, and, you know, helped create everything that we've created. You know, it's absolutely, you know, crazy.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, listen, I want to be able to take my kid out back in my backyard and fly and introduce him to drone flight. And under this new law, I can't do that unless there's certain situations met. You know, I don't even want to have to go to a FAA to fly my drone. You know, I think that there needs to be some solutions that we propose. I mean, I think that we should let RC airplanes and hobbyists fly in Class G airspace, period. Or let's use the LANT system. LANT system's up and working, right? So why not use that system to do this? And let's don't take away the freedom of flight from being able to show our kids what flying a drone or an RC airplane is all about. I mean, I remember that moment myself. It wasn't that long ago. So I want to be able to continue to pass that down to our kids,
Yeah.
And I think, one big question then for everyone that's listening is, what's the next action, or what can we do as a community, and how do we do that? Like, how can we comment on this? And I think, Damon, you had a bit of, a good tutorial on how to comment on that and leave your feedback, basically, have our voices heard.
Yeah, and so to comment on it, there's a couple things, and we're going to give you guys some particular resources, but there's and we'll get everybody's opinion on this, but the way I view it, we basically have 3 levels of commenting. One, I think, is where, first of all, when you comment, you have to be calm and give useful comments, and then specifically useful solutions. You can't just say the FAA sucks, they're ruining aviation. That's not going to be beneficial for anyone, right? So you want to give them good positive feedback. And I think the main 4 points to discuss with them or to point out are business. How does this, if this goes into in its current form, if this goes into a rule or a law, how is this going to affect business? Now, business is broad-based, right? Because you have manufacturers that build drones. If the drone sales go from 8 million to 100,000 drone sales a year, or the commercial drone side, the consumer drone side just dries up and disappears, how does that affect manufacturers, resellers, retailers, stores? How does that impact it? And all the dealers. And then what about the people that operate commercially? That fly drones for a living, service-based business, like everybody on this panel. They've built a big successful business service with drones, servicing their clients with it. So a drone service industry, which is basically the 107, anything commercially you'd fly under a 107, then that's going to be dramatically affected. And then not to mention the recreational side, all the manufacturers and then all the money and everything generated for communities and stuff like that. So business is a huge one. Second is privacy. That's
totally
a huge deal with the privacy aspect of it. We don't want, the way that it's written is, well, technically only law enforcement and the FAA will have access to your information, maybe. But
no way. Yeah, no way.
Your drone at that time.
Right. Can you imagine if it, so how this is going to work? And we didn't really talk about privacy, but I know you're talking about how to respond to the rulemaking, but real quick on privacy. This is a big one for me because we're out here in the field all the time, and we feel this, right? So with the USS service centers, there's probably going to be an app, right? And the app, anybody with a phone can download the app, and you're going to be able just to see where the pilots are, where the remote pilots are, what their location is. That's fine for law enforcement, for government officials, and for security people. I get it. They need to know where we are. And by the way, they do today. They can do that today. That's nothing new. But to have, and I don't mean this derogatory, but just anybody know where I am. I get people all the time. I'm going to shoot your drone down. What are you doing? Where are you flying? What's this all about? And maybe even becoming verbal or and with me. And I just don't want that. There's no reason why everybody needs to know where the pilot is at all times, unless they're law enforcement or, government official. And I'm pretty adamant that privacy is very important to me, and I know it is to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
100% with that. There's actually in part of the proposal a way with the USS that you could actually apply for anonymity, or you would actually get an ID or a code that would not release your personal information. That personal information would only be available to law enforcement. But the problem with that is, again, would that be an additional expense to have that anonymity option placed in there? So again, it's like, number one, we need to hit that we don't need our personal identifiable information out there to the general public. And then number two, we don't want to have to pay an extra amount of money in order to have that privacy. And number three, how is our personally identifiable information going to be protected by this USS if it continues to go down that direction? So we've got to make sure that we're aware of those options as well, or as those problems as well.
Right. And the other point to that is, even with that, if you pay the extra money and you have the privacy, it still transmits the exact location of your drone while it's flying.
Absolutely.
That's the bother. That's what I don't like. Yeah.
Right. So anybody can come up and see you now. And we don't have this with automobiles. I mean, we have license plates on our cars, but if you accidentally cut somebody off or while you're driving, and they got and now they can basically get your information. I mean, that's a scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because this industry is disruptive and a lot of people aren't educated about all the benefits and, all the good that drones do. A lot of people just have they have a negative connotation with drones.
Mm-hmm.
and that, we want to try and minimize that as much as possible and keep that at bay. So, so the privacy thing, that's another big thing. So we're going to leave you guys with and give you some resources, but there's basically kind of 4 points that we suggest, or that I'm suggesting that you guys should comment on. So one of them is the business. Second is privacy. Third is for the recreational flying, and this brings up we talked about it a little bit and how this is such a big deal all the way through with people in aviation, aeronautics and everything, but we didn't talk about the legacy drone portion of it. And that is, if you guys want to comment on that, I'd love your feedback and to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have a real problem with impacting the hobbyists, because I really believe that it could have the huge implications of truly restricting the development of new pilots, young people that are passionate about aviation and aeronautics, technicians, young kids wanting to build and put together their own aircraft and learning how to fly. So I really think that it will hamper that.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest with you, there's a lot of money that drone businesses, manufacturers of the actual drone and UAS equipment, that money that goes from the hobbyists to help support the new technologies that are coming out of these industry giants or even new drone companies could be impacted and have a real negative effect on the drone industry.
Yeah, just to be clear, the way it sits now for the rule making, the way the rule is written, the legacy drones are not going to be able to work for the broadcast or internet based remote ID. So they don't meet the ANSI standard, ANSI standard for serial number. And I don't know, Bobby, if you've got more on that, but basically the drones that we have today, people are not sure if they're going to be able to be retrofit or with some kind of a piece of equipment or hardware, but I don't think that's going to work because the drone serial numbers have to meet a certain ANSI standard. So we're going to have all new drones, and that's a big deal, for people, I think.
Yeah, I agree, Greg. Kind of to address that, the FAA is approaching it as number one, drones manufacturers would be able to upgrade with firmware updates, but that has not been proven yet, and it hasn't been tested yet. And then the other approach is the FAA has put in their document that they believe the life of a drone is only 3 years, so that by the time this rule is set in place and made law, that the drones that we are operating today would basically be obsolete anyway. So that's the approach they're going.
Yeah, and I have a real problem with that too, because theoretically that's the average, but some people keep drones a lot longer.
Yeah.
Like some of the people that are operating drones as we know it, like multi-rotors, and just take something like a DJI Phantom 3 standard. That shoots in RAW. You can get some amazing pictures with that. It's an inexpensive drone, but that's kind of an outdated drone. A lot of people still use that to this day.
Absolutely.
And what happens if you buy a drone 2 years from now? Still within the 3 years, that drone's only a couple months old, but it's not up to spec with the new hardware and software. And that's the other challenge I have with their update scenario is it's going to, we're talking about hardware, the ability to actually broadcast data, on an internet-based system and actually have data that, service plan. And that has to be, that's hardware equipped stuff. That's not going to be just, most likely, an easy plug and play system.
I agree. I'll give you an example, real life example, right? So let's say I'm growing my drone business and, hey, this is going well. I want to get into doing inspections. Well, I need thermal. Thermal is expensive, guys. And let's say I go out and buy a new Matrice, 400, whatever the model is that comes out. It's expensive with a new XT camera, XT3 camera and on it and all that. Well, another option would be to go, and a lot of guys do this today. I'm going to go get an Inspire 1 that's 2.5 years old or 3 years old. Damon, you can help me with that, and put an XT camera on it. It works great. Well, no longer are you going to be able to do that. And I know a lot of people running an Inspire 1 with an XT camera on it, right? Can't do that in the future.
Yeah, and that's 4 years old now. That was released in January 2016. So,
but it has a place in a certain situation, right?
Well, and then there's those of us that take, because we believe in redundancy, we take two drones with us to do a job just in case there's a failure of one. And yeah, I take a Mavic Pro, a Platinum, along with my Mavic Pro 2, and I've never had to use it, but having it there brings that security, and that would help. That would eliminate being able to do that, where you could have to buy a whole new drone systems.
Yeah. So, and those are all great points, and again, these are things that we would encourage you guys include when in your in your comments that you do. And then the fourth point is basically the internet-based versus the broadcast. And the broadcast is, it's to me, it's a no-brainer. There's no reason to come up with new technology that hasn't been proven, isn't developed, and won't work with any of the old stuff. It seems like a really complicated, overpriced solution to a problem that we already have a solution for, that's free and
right,
already in the majority of all the drones that are flying, and can easily be firmware and software updated. So
totally.
So I think that's, and the focus here is on when you make your comments, is to provide resolutions and solutions. So don't just say an internet-based system sucks. Just say that, a solution for it, which is a broadcast system. What you don't like about the internet-based system, some of these other challenges there, and how the broadcast solution, solves the problem. And
the broadcast system works today, right? And it does solve the problem. When I fly my Matrice 210, 200, either one of them, I've got ADS-B, which is, a broadcast system, and I can see aircraft fly across my screen, right? That technology is there. We just need to implement that technology in other drones.
Yeah. So I guess, so one thing we should identify is what is exactly the difference between internet-based and broadcast-based. So Greg, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, really, and remember that standard remote ID includes both broadcast and internet.
Great point.
And then limited is just internet. So let's talk about what that means. What are the differences between the two? So for broadcast remote ID, or broadcast, where the drone has the information, right? And it's transmitting from the drone directly to that information. It's giving lat long, it's giving all the information, location, serial number, all that information is being broadcast direct, okay? For internet-based, that information is coming from the drone to the pilot, remote control, and then being transmitted through USS service centers through cellular or internet, okay? So it's Wi-Fi or cellular internet service that's transmitting that information. So either the drone direct or through the internet, if that makes sense.
And what part of the problem with that is it creates one more step or several more options that could go wrong. I mean, there's a lot of things, and one of the biggest thing is cybersecurity vulnerabilities. With all the drones that would be in the air, with a USS having to process all that information, them being able to protect and secure that information from cybersecurity issues would be a huge ordeal to try and overcome.
Great point, Bobby, because you're dealing with third parties, guys. This is not just one government agency, right? When we get into USS, we're dealing with third parties that obviously they have standards they have to uphold to, but it's just another level of security. That's a real good point, Bobby.
Yeah, and again, we want to try and eliminate that, that from happening where we're relying on, a third private party service, because if it goes down, if there's a problem, I mean, this could hamper or impair or, basically eliminate the ability for your drone to be able to get airborne and take off. And that could essentially, that could be a lot of drones are being used for life-saving missions now, and we're going to have more and more of those in the future. So, that's something to keep in mind and, and consider in this whole process. The other thing I want to bring up too with that, as we're talking about, the drones that are going to be flying and, the subscriptions and what you have to get and not get, there's a lot of confusion around using some of these smaller drones. So this is a little Mavic Mini right here. So this one falls under the 250 gram rule. So you don't have to register this drone. And so, this is I wasn't really sure of this drone's place in the world, but then I'm a big fan of it. It's a good little drone. But there's some confusion around the commercial application. So if you, under this new rule, if the way it's written goes in, then this drone does not have to be, A, you don't have to register it, and B, it doesn't have to be equipped with this RID. So it's basically exempt from it, as long as you're flying recreationally. Now, if you're flying commercially, then all that is different. If you're a 107 pilot and using this to fly commercially, you do have to register it, and it does fall under the requirements of the RID. So just want to make sure that that's cleared up for everybody, because this isn't necessarily going to be a solution the way that it's written now. If you're operating commercially, then you'll have to go by those rules.
Great point. And you can imagine the manufacturers probably in the future aren't going to make those small drones RID accessible units, so if you can't use them for 107 period, good point.
Exactly. Yeah. And we'll probably see a big push on manufacturers if this or some version of this goes through, for the huge line of consumer drones under the 250 gram rule, because that would be the only way that recreational the recreational side of this could survive and not thrive, but at least survive.
Yeah,
so
there were some concerning statements in regard to the smaller below 0.55 drones that the FAA put in this document. That was concerning to me is looking at weight-based versus just being in the air. So they could change that as well. So we need to be aware and stay up to date to that as well. So. Yeah,
and there's so much. I mean, again, we're at the beginning stages of this disruptive industry and the rules and laws and everything that's there. But the fact that basically a drone this size, or you go one size up to like a little DJI Mavic Air or something, or a little Parrot, that and a 40 or a 54-pound drone are basically considered the same class is just absolutely ridiculous. That would be like saying a bicycle and an 18-wheeler are in the same category for operation. From a safety standpoint, it's just totally different. But the different topic for a different radio show then. So let me show you guys really quick how to do this. So what you're going to actually do. So we'll provide you guys the link so you can go there. But this is you're going to go to the FAA site under the UAS remote identification, and then what you're going to do is just scroll down here, and when you get down here, it's got under the notice of proposed rulemaking right here. There's a link and the actual docket number. So you're going to copy this docket number here, and then you just click on the link, and it's going to take you to the comment section here. Now, as you can see, we've got several comments. So we've gotten, just in the last 90 days, over 5,000 comments that have already come through.
And I just want to make a point. That's not enough. Remember how many drone operators are out there, guys? We've got to make our voice heard.
Absolutely, because I think about it, there's 8 million drones out there with somewhere between 1.3 and 1.7 million drone pilots. And, And just the AMA alone has over 200,000 members. A lot of the FPV racing organizations have, you know, literally tens of thousands of members, and we only have 5,000 comments. So first of all, this has to be done. You have to submit your comment by March 2nd of this year. Okay, so you're going to follow these links. You click on, you paste it in the search there, and it's going to bring up right here where you comment. Okay, so you're going to click over here on this comment now. Click on that, and then this is going to open up the comment section where you can post your comment and you put your information in here. Now, a couple points I want to make about this. Number one, you can comment basically as many times as you want, and you can comment on separate topics. So I think it's really important that if you're serious about this, that you comment on the different points. Instead of writing one big comment that's going to be really long, comment to the, you know, to the safety aspect of it, comment to the manufacturer's aspect of it, you know, because on the business side, you've got the manufacturers and the dealers and the retailers. And then on a commercial operator side, if you're a 107 pilot and you do this for a living, or you aspire to or want to do this for a living, comment on how that could affect you there. The privacy, you know, and some of these other points we have, and we'll provide you a list of these that you can do. But I think it would be beneficial if they were commented on by, you know, if everybody would comment on, submit anywhere from 3 to 5 comments on there.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Don't think you have to put everything in one box, right? And I just want to add a couple of things right here while we're talking about the beginning of the comments. This, you know, hey, represent our industry as a professional.
Absolutely.
You know, this is a big deal. And if you are flying drones for a living, then, you know, you need to represent, and don't, you know, fill in your name as, you know, angry American, you know, or whatever, you know, and worry about it. You know, be serious about it. Put your name in there and let them know how you feel about it. And we're going to, like Damon said, we're going to come up with some, you know, some bullet points, some overview topics that'll help you out with our guide that we give out. We want to make it so that it's easy for you to make it personal. And we're going to do that. We're going to remind you of this podcast and some of the solutions that we think are out there, and you can build your own opinion. But, and the last thing is, you know, we've got to share this. We've got to get our community taking action. So if we know drone pilots, and we're going to have to, you know, forward this to them and get them to comment, give it to your neighbor, and what do we do after this is done, right? So after we make these comments, write a letter to your congressman, you know,
Yeah.
don't just make the comment and be done. Let's let everybody know how the drone industry feels about this, and let your neighbor who's not a drone operator know about it, you know, and anybody can comment, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
So we'll put it in a package that it's easy for you to explain and easy for you to use.
100%.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, I know we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, and I could talk to you guys about drones and the business development in this amazing industry for days or years, which is really cool. But we'll go ahead and wrap this up. If you guys have any other additional questions or you know, comments or concerns, you know, feel free to let us know. And any closing thoughts or comments from you guys?
And this is a great opportunity for us to have a huge impact on our industry. Don't miss it. Be engaged, get as educated as you possibly can with the time that you have. Utilize the resources that are going to be provided to you, but please take the time to do it. Take the time to share and pressure your friends who are drone pilots, even realtors that you have relationships with, or other business partners. Share with them saying, please help us make a comment. Help us save the industry to make it better, but to keep it from being so restrictive that we can't really function within the guidelines. And it creates a huge impact. Because I know if it impacts me financially, it's going to impact the realtor financially. So please take the time. And man, we appreciate you guys so much.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this podcast. It's really fun to be able to collaborate with successful drone entrepreneurs and the Drone Boss with the Sky Network. Thank you so much. What a wealth of knowledge we've got right there on that screen in that group of people. And just we'd like to hear what you think about this. We would love to see comments as we forward these on to our friends. And if we can answer questions, we certainly will do that. So thank you for joining us on this podcast from Greg White here at Dronepreneur.
And Eric, you got any
Awesome.
closing thoughts there?
Yeah, just and make sure if you have any specific questions that you'd like for us to address on our next podcast, just put them in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe if you liked it. And if you have anything else that you want us to cover, please feel free.
Yep, and check these guys out. So again, we threw a lot at you. We're going to give you some resources to follow up, and bottom line, the main takeaway is you have to comment. You have to take action. You have to let your voice be heard. And ideally, there's 3 ways to do it. Number 1, you can basically create your own response and do that. That's going to be the best. Second, we're going to provide you with some templates. So if you would take these templates and personalize them a little bit. So basically, don't just cut and paste them, but actually put in your story, your thoughts, and your opinion in there. But this will give you the foundation and should accelerate the process. And then third, if you're on the fence and you're like, I don't have time to write it, I don't have time to read it, I don't have time to comment, at least copy and paste the templates and at least post those. If nothing else, it's going to be like signing a petition, and that's going to be another little little quill in the feather there that's going to give us that much more voices, that much more interest that's there. So again, follow that. Please be sure and comment on this. This is super important for this time in our industry as it grows and develops. Again, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to talking to you guys next time, and to this amazing panel that's here, guys. It's great to see you, and you guys, you all take care.